Peyton Gendron. On May 14, 2022, an 18-year-old drove over 200 miles with a single horrifying purpose. Peyton Gendron left his home in Conklin, New York, heading to a predominantly black neighborhood in Buffalo. His destination? A Tops Friendly Market supermarket on Jefferson Avenue. What he carried with him was chilling: a legally purchased Bushmaster XM15 AR-15 style rifle, modified with high-capacity magazines, and a 180-page manifesto filled with white supremacist ideology. Gendron didn't just plan this attack, he documented it. Wearing a helmet-mounted camera, he live-streamed the massacre on Twitch as it unfolded. His manifesto cited the Great Replacement conspiracy theory and expressed admiration for previous mass shooters like Brenton Tarrant, the Christchurch terrorist. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence. This was calculated, premeditated hate. Inside the supermarket, Gendron systematically targeted black shoppers and employees. Among his victims was Aaron Salter Jr., a 55-year-old security guard and retired Buffalo police officer who heroically confronted the shooter but couldn't stop him. 10 people lost their lives that day. 3 others survived gunshot wounds. The legal consequences came swiftly. In state court, Gendron faced 10 counts of first-degree murder, 10 counts of second-degree murder as a hate crime, 3 counts of attempted murder as a hate crime, and notably 1 count of domestic terrorism motivated by hate, the first use of this charge in New York. On November 28, 2022, he pleaded guilty to all counts.
I'm very sorry. I did a terrible thing that day. I shot and killed people because...
On February 15, 2023, Judge Susan Egan delivered his sentence. 10 consecutive life sentences without parole, 1 for each murder victim, plus 25 years for each attempted murder count.
The judgment of this court for your conviction under the first count of the indictment: a domestic act of terrorism motivated by hate in the first degree, an A1 felony, that you be sentenced to life imprisonment without parole.
But the state sentence wasn't the end. Federal prosecutors charged him with 14 counts of hate crimes resulting in death, 13 counts of hate crimes involving bodily injury, and 10 counts of firearm discharge during a crime of violence. He pleaded guilty again on November 28, 2022, accepting a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. On January 15, 2025, he received an additional federal life sentence without parole. Today, Peyton Gendron sits in FCI Elkton, a federal prison in Ohio. He holds 10 state life sentences and 1 federal life sentence, all without the possibility of parole. He will never walk free again. But Gendron's case raises a haunting question. How does a teenager become consumed by such hate? Our next story shows that sometimes, the monster isn't created by ideology, but by something much closer to home. Nicholas Browning. The Browning family seemed ordinary from the outside. John Browning, 45, was a successful attorney. His wife Tamara, 44, was a dedicated homemaker. Their sons Gregory, 14, and Benjamin, 13, were typical teenagers. But on the night of February 1, 2008, their eldest son Nicholas would shatter any illusion of normalcy. Nicholas Browning was 15 years old when he took his father's .40 caliber Glock handgun and methodically moved through his family's Caucusville, Maryland home. One by one, as his parents and brothers slept, he shot each of them in the head, execution style. For people who loved him, trusted him, were murdered in their beds. What makes this case particularly chilling is what Nicholas did next. He staged the scene to look like a home invasion, opening drawers, scattering items around. Then he left the house and went to a sleepover with friends. He went to a movie. He played video games. 4 days he maintained the charade, acting shocked and grieving when the bodies were discovered on February 2nd. But the facade cracked quickly. On February 6, 2008, after initially lying to investigators, Nicholas confessed. His motive? Resentment. He was angry about being grounded, about strict parenting, about losing his driving privileges.
Why would I jeopardize? You put money into it. I have a very large, or had whatever, inheritance coming to me, regardless if there's insurance money involved or not.
According to his confession, he wanted to end the family, to gain freedom and access to an inheritance.
Months before the murder, he had told children on the bus, 16-year-old, 15-year-olds, that he was tired of his father telling him what to do, and he was going to kill his father, and he was going to kill his brother so he didn't have to share the inheritance.
4 lives extinguished over teenage rebellion. Maryland law allowed Nicholas to be charged as an adult despite his age. He faced 4 counts of first-degree murder. In October 2008, he pleaded guilty to all counts, avoiding trial. On February 27, 2009, Baltimore County Circuit Court Judge Thomas Bollinger handed down the sentence. Life in prison for killing his father, a consecutive life sentence for killing his mother, and concurrent life sentences for killing his brothers. The technical breakdown meant 2 consecutive life sentences plus 2 concurrent ones. Under Maryland law, which doesn't allow life without parole for juveniles, Nicholas would be eligible for parole after serving approximately 23 to 35 years, depending on good conduct credits. Today, Nicholas Browning is 33 years old, incarcerated at North Branch Correctional Institution, a maximum security facility in Maryland. In prison interviews, he has expressed remorse and participates in educational programs. But he must serve at least 2 full life terms before he can even be considered for parole. The boy who destroyed his family to gain freedom lost his own in the process. While Browning's crime was hidden behind closed doors, our next case played out in the most public and traumatic way possible. In the hallways of a high school. Ethan Crumbley. November 30, 2021, started like any normal school day at Oxford High School in Michigan. Students filed into classes, chatted with friends worried about tests. Then at 12:51 p.m., 15-year-old Ethan Crumbley walked into the school and pulled out a Sig Sauer 9mm handgun, an early Christmas gift his father had purchased just 4 days earlier. In under 2 minutes, Ethan fired 32 rounds into a crowded hallway. 4 students lost their lives: Madison Baldwin, 17, Tate Meyer, 16, Hannah St. Juliana, 14, and Justin Schilling, 17. 7 others were wounded, 6 students and 1 teacher, some with injuries they'll carry for the rest of their lives. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how preventable it might have been. Ethan had journaled extensively about his violent plans. He'd written, "My parents won't listen to me about help or a therapist." The day before the shooting, he'd drawn disturbing images on a math worksheet that prompted a school meeting with his parents. They were advised to take him home. They refused and left him at school. That night, Ethan recorded audio on his phone. "I'm gonna have so much fun." He live-streamed portions of the attack. After firing those 32 rounds, he surrendered to a school resource officer without resistance. His motivation, according to prosecutors and his own journals, stemmed from mental health struggles, feelings of being bullied, and a desire for revenge and infamy. The legal system moved quickly. Despite being only 15, Ethan was charged as an adult with 24 felony counts. 4 counts of first-degree murder, 13 counts of assault with intent to murder, 7 counts of aggravated assault, and significantly, 1 count of terrorism causing death, the first such conviction in a U.S. mass shooting case. In October 2022, Ethan pleaded guilty to all 24 counts. But the question remained, could a 15-year-old receive life without parole? In September 2023, Judge Kwame Rowe held a Miller hearing to determine if such a sentence was constitutional. The judge examined Ethan's level of premeditation, his history of animal cruelty, his obsession with violence, and his initial lack of remorse. Judge Rowe concluded yes, life without parole was appropriate. On December 8, 2023, the sentence came down: 4 consecutive life sentences without parole for the murders, plus 40 to 70 years for each assault with intent to murder charge, 4 years for each aggravated assault, and 40 years for terrorism. All consecutive. The effective result? Life without parole with additional centuries tacked on. At sentencing, Ethan addressed the court.
I'm a really bad person. I have done terrible things that no one should ever do. I have lied, been not trustworthy. I've hurt many people.
Judge Rowe was unmoved, noting that Ethan had asked for a better gun to carry out his plan and wanted to witness the impact of his crime, which is why he didn't take his own life. In June 2024, Ethan's attorneys filed an appeal, citing new evidence including possible fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and childhood trauma. They argue life without parole is unconscionable for a 15-year-old. As of November 2025, that appeal is still pending. Meanwhile, in an unprecedented move, Ethan's parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley, were convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2024. They each received 10 to 15 years for failing to secure the gun and ignoring their son's mental health crisis.
This court that you served 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections, that you received credit for 850.
They're currently appealing. Today, Ethan Crumbley is 20 years old, incarcerated at Oaks Correctional Facility in Michigan. He participates in therapy and educational programs, but he holds 4 life sentences without parole. Unless his appeal succeeds, he will die in prison. Our final story is different. It's about a boy whose life sentences were eventually overturned, proving that sometimes, even the justice system recognizes when punishment goes too far. Kenneth Young. In June 2000, a 14-year-old boy named Kenneth Young found himself trapped in an impossible situation. His mother was addicted to crack cocaine. Child services had failed to intervene despite reports of neglect and abuse. And Jacques Bethia, a 24-year-old crack dealer and his mother's drug supplier, had decided Kenneth would help him commit armed robberies. Over a 30-day period during which Kenneth turned 15, he participated in 4 incidents at Tampa area hotels, 3 armed robberies and 1 attempted armed robbery. But the circumstances matter here. Bethia planned the heist, supplied the gun, and primarily wielded it. Kenneth acted mostly as a lookout, though he did hold the gun to victims' heads at least once. Kenneth later claimed Bethia threatened harm to him and his mother if he refused. In one robbery, Kenneth actually intervened to prevent Bethia from raping a victim. No one was physically injured during these robberies, though victims understandably suffered trauma, PTSD, and lifelong fear. When Kenneth and Bethia were arrested shortly after the final incident, the justice system faced a choice: recognize Kenneth's secondary role and age or treat him as harshly as an adult. Florida chose harsh. Kenneth was tried as an adult and faced 3 counts of armed robbery and 1 count of attempted armed robbery. He pleaded guilty. In March 2001, at age 15, a judge sentenced him to 4 consecutive life sentences without parole, 1 for each count. For context, the sentencing guidelines minimum for an adult would have been about 4.5 years. Bethia, the mastermind who was 24 years old, received just 1 life sentence in a separate trial. Kenneth had no prior criminal record. He was a child coerced by an adult predator, living in poverty with an addicted parent and no protection. Yet the court emphasized the terror inflicted on victims and gave him 4 life sentences without hope of release. But Kenneth's story doesn't end there. In 2010, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a landmark ruling in Graham v. Florida, declaring that life without parole for juveniles in non-homicide cases was unconstitutional. Kenneth's sentences were vacated. In 2011, after serving approximately 11 years, Kenneth was resentenced. The court acknowledged his rehabilitation but determined 11 years wasn't sufficient given the crime's severity. He received 4 concurrent 30-year terms plus 10 years of probation. He appealed, but in 2013 Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeal upheld the sentence. Then, in 2014, something remarkable happened. A review of his case noted his exemplary prison record, only 1 minor infraction for an unmade bed across more than a decade. Kenneth had earned his GED, completed vocational training in barbering, participated in anger management and substance abuse programs, and expressed genuine remorse. The state reduced his sentence to release after 21 years. At his 2011 resentencing, Kenneth had told the court,
"First and foremost, Your Honor, I want to take the time out and say I take full responsibility for my actions and my role in these crimes. I have lived with regret every day as a civilized human being for these crimes. I have been incarcerated for 11 years, and I have taken advantage of every opportunity available for me in prison to better myself. I have been a model prisoner while being incarcerated. I have been
In January 2021, Kenneth Young walked out of prison. He was 39 years old. He had served 21 years for crimes he committed at 14 under coercion. Today he's under 10-year probation that ends around 2031. He works as a barber in Florida, mentors at-risk youth, and focuses on family reunification and juvenile justice advocacy. He was featured in the 2014 documentary 15 to Life, Kenneth's Story. Kenneth's original 4 consecutive life sentences without parole were reduced to 0 active life sentences. His case stands as proof that the justice system can evolve, that rehabilitation is possible, and that a child should not be defined forever by their worst day.